largely what we found is virality into the right markets, or even less views into the right markets, is way better than mass virality.
You're listening to Customer Growth Sessions, presented by Intergrowth, where we talk through strategies to help up-and-coming e-commerce businesses bring in more customers. I'm your host, Pat Ahern. Let's jump in.
Welcome back, listeners, to the latest episode of Customer Growth Sessions. Today, I'm thrilled to have on a longtime friend, Brandon Kim, the CEO and founder over at Brevite. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Pat. I appreciate you reaching out and then me reaching back out to actually get on this. So I haven't been doing podcasts in a moment, but we're getting back into the grind of it. So really happy to kind of kick it off here.
Definitely. We're thrilled to have you on. I know it's been maybe like a year and a half that we've been trying to schedule this one. So I'm glad we could finally get on today.
I love it. Yeah. Going to make season 2. So I'm very appreciative.
Brilliant. Well, Brandon, give us an overview. What is Brevite?
Brevite is a company I co-founded with my 2 brothers about 10 years ago now. We're a direct-to-consumer backpack brand, specifically selling bags to photographers and creators and travelers. We have a very large organic following. So we have the largest organic following of any backpack brand, about maybe 2.5 million followers at this point. And we've kind of been through all of the stages of e-com over the last 10 years. So we missed the pre-2015 era. At this point, we've seen it all and we've kind of done it all. So really looking forward to chatting through some of kind of what's happening behind the scenes here.
Totally agree. Yeah. And to your point, I mean, you're the first person I think of when I think of like successful Kickstarter campaigns. I think of that as really how like Brevite started out back in, that would have been 2015. And then I think about, there's a whole bunch of cool stuff that you guys have worked on. But I feel like every single big, like, call it social marketing-esque campaign, at some point I've seen the Brevite brand associated with it. And I've seen Brevite do really well here. So I'm super excited to jump in on this. Kickstarter's changed a lot in the past 10 years. So let's skip ahead, but maybe quick context for listeners. You guys started a Kickstarter campaign, went extremely well, was a great pre-sale tool for the business. But post Kickstarter, talk to us about maybe where the next like 20 to 50 sales really came from for the business after you'd gotten that initial momentum.
That's a good question. We got our start on Kickstarter. We were like juniors and seniors in college, actually. So we kind of started this thing from our dorm room. Pat and I grew up together and then kind of like refound each other at one of the incubators / accelerators, which was a lot of fun, to which I think we're one of the last 2 kind of standing on like with our own things. With all that said, that really gave us the initial cash to place our first PO for inventory. And we had kind of near perfect product market fit. We had seen this problem in the market that customers wanted a camera backpack that didn't look like a camera backpack. And so our following 20 to 50 orders actually just kind of continued to flow in via word of mouth. And that was really, really interesting. We didn't know we had a business once the Kickstarter ended. We just kind of like, it was kind of this interesting project we had run. And then we realized we had a business like a few months later. We're like, oh, this thing needs to continue. We need to continue placing orders, servicing customers. And we continued to do interesting viral things, right? We'd write articles and like we'd get those posted to large photo publications, which would then get posted to Reddit. And those would go viral there. I know Pat and myself worked on SEO kind of in the early days, which drove a lot of traffic there. We did some interesting PR. We made friends with YouTubers in the early days and they posted about our product. It was a lot of that. It was very, very scrappy. In its later forms, it ended up looking like Facebook ads and kind of mass organic appeal and kind of going into more traditional sales channels like wholesale and things like that.
And I want to dive into that community building in a second. But first, I want to ask about the term you used there, near perfect product market fit. Because when you and I were catching up before this, that was a term that you brought up as well. Like, what does that term mean to you, near perfect product market fit?
Oh, yeah, man. Nobody really ever picks up that I use that term. But you have to have near perfect product market fit for product to work in Facebook ads or kind of almost any channel, right, where you need any sort of efficiency. You've got product market fit, you have channel market fit. And then I think like there's also kind of aesthetic market fit that exists as well. Near perfect product market fit is what you need. You don't need perfect product market fit. It's going to take you like a few iterations on that product to get perfect product market fit, right? To really 10x that product. But to get near perfect product market fit, it just takes really good research, right? And I think this is a step that a lot of people don't understand or even skip. And I'm guilty of that as well. And it never turns out good. So like you got to do like the legwork to get that near perfect product market fit. And then it makes everything downstream go way easier. So like in the kind of like 4 or 5 years later, we launched kind of the next iteration of our first bag called the Jumper. And that one had like practically perfect product market fit. It worked in ads. The community was going crazy after it, right? We're going to be launching probably later this year a third iteration of this product now, kind of fixing a lot of the little pieces that are like now we've heard over the years that like people don't like. And by doing that, you can find extreme efficiencies in your channels. I think a lot of marketers like look towards the marketing channel or like kind of like what they're doing in the marketing channel to fix the problem, but oftentimes it's the product itself that's the problem. And you can find sales in the efficiency or even the inefficiency of a channel, which is very interesting.
So, looking back on Brevity, let's say you could go to 2015, Brandon, and ultimately just talk to him about, hey, here's some of the things you should be mindful of to really build near perfect product market fit. In your eyes, is it the type of thing where version 1 of the product should be at that stage? Or is it the type of thing that you're better off launching a pretty rough version 1, learning a bunch about your customers, and then having that version 2, in your case, Jumper, really launch with that near perfect product market fit element?
Oh, I think it's definitely the latter of the two. You definitely want to get your feet wet first, right? There's like kind of that failure to launch thing. Like I'm seeing it a lot with students lately. Like they used to kind of like hitting the ground running, like when they'd start their things. I talked to a lot of students who are starting companies because that's what I did. And you did, Pat. And like we just were like, told like you're not allowed back into this like accelerator space until you go and like do all of your interviews, right? And then you just have to go do the like chat with like 30, 40 people and then like and chase them down. Whereas like right now I'm seeing a lot of students, and maybe it's like short form video and like people's kind of shorter attention spans from all this, including myself, like stopping that. But yeah, you're better off getting into the motion of it, like really trying to figure it out. And then like once you understand what the product is, and then you understand like the intimate problem within the market, then you can make something perfect. So that's why you see a lot of companies, they kind of like, it takes 10 years to be an overnight success. Like, cause like after 10 years, they're like, oh, now I finally understand brand. Oh, now I finally understand the problem I'm solving for. So for us, it took us 5 years to understand like, this is the product we need. It took us another 5 years to understand like, this is what really the world of brand is.
Oh, definitely. And it's funny thinking back to, that first incubator, because I remember exactly to your point, I remember one of the requirements was you need to have a formal business plan in order to come in here. And I so clearly remember putting together like the shoddiest business plan of all time, being like, here you go. Can I cut back in now? But absolutely. I love where you're coming from. Focus on getting as much info as you can from your customers, build towards near perfect product market fit, but don't be afraid to launch that version 1. I hear the classic phrase, like you should be embarrassed by version 1 of your product, website, whatever it may be. Otherwise you launched way too late.
Oh yeah. Oh, our first website was like real weird. Even our first product, I look at it now that like I know so much about backpacks. Like I didn't mean to learn this much about backpacks, but I design backpacks now, and I look at our first product and I'm like, whoa, like that was a good first take, but I can see all the problems with it now. I'm like, damn, I'm a way better bag designer now. So yeah, no, I love it. And yeah, our first business plan was rough.
As it should be. Well, speaking of overnight success, 10 years in the making, I want to talk a little about social media. I have to reference some of my notes here. I pulled this up this morning, but as of this morning, Brevity has 200,000 followers on Instagram, 1.2 million followers on TikTok, and 1.4 million subscribers on YouTube. So I want to talk about how that comes about. Like, how do you build for that over the course of 10 years? And yeah, let's start out there. That's a super broad question, but where do you think would be a good place to dive in on what drove that success over time?
No, it is a great question. And maybe starting broad is helpful. I didn't even realize we have 1.4 on YouTube now, which is crazy. A lot of it comes from consistency and really understanding who the market is. I can't take credit for it. It's actually my brother Dylan, who's really the brilliant mind. And he's like the true marketer in the company. He can sell ice to an Eskimo type person. And so like, it's funny, like we've been running our Instagram for 10 years, but it took 10 years to hit 200,000. For YouTube and TikTok, it took 3 years, right? I think it took us like 2 years to get 1 million followers on each. I think YouTube may have taken 1 year. So like there's kind of like this exponential growth that takes place. It required an incredible amount of infrastructure to do this. And then always the challenge with kind of these large followings or going viral is you have to build out like large internal, almost enterprise systems to manage all those videos. Like we posted over 3,000 videos, right? Which means that like there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of sub clips and sub assets that we have to organize. So we have to build a system for that. And then on the other side of it, you have to be in tune with the customer and your viewer, which is not always in alignment with virality. And so that is kind of the devil of what it is. So balancing the two has taken us time to really understand. We've had videos that have gone like 150 million views viral, and like they kind of like they reach the most basic understandable video that there is. So it doesn't move product, it doesn't move sales, it just gathers endless views, which isn't necessarily a good thing. Largely what we found is virality into the right markets, or even less views into the right markets, is way better than mass virality. If you go to our top videos, like a lot of those are just, they don't hit a specific buyer. And that in itself is kind of dangerous to any sort of large social media account. I think any social media account that's over 1 million followers runs into this. Whereas, if you have a smaller following that you're very intimately tied into, there's a lot of power to be had there. So not to say that if you can get a large following, I think it is incredible. And I think there is huge outsized halo effects that happen with that, right? But I wouldn't say that you should let that be the barrier to having an organic presence that you really care about and invest into.
Interesting. Well, and along those lines, and I'm curious if you know the number off the top of your head. I remember it was a video about, I think it was a girl climbing into one of the Brevite backpacks that really went viral. If memory serves, and I mean, fact check me on this, Brandon, I think it got like 1 billion views. Do I have that right?
People ask me all the time, should I be using ChatGPT to create content for my site? So here's the thing. AI is great at quickly spitting out blog content. It's also great at pissing off your following. If you've spent years building your brand and follower base, why would you risk that all with AI-generated content? At Intergrowth, we work with companies that see their brand as an asset to get more customers through human-crafted articles that your customers look for online. We master your brand voice and work with your team to write the best articles on the internet that bring you customers on autopilot from search engines like Google. Interested in hearing more? Reach out to us at intergrowth.com/CGS to book a complimentary strategy session with our team.
Not a billion. I think it was like 150 million, but like we have a bunch of those. Yeah, she was climbing into like a big bag. And it's so simple. Like conceptually, it's just like we literally called up our factory partner and, we're like, can you do us a favor? Can you make a 5-foot tall bag? And they're like, well, what dimensions do you want? We're like, no, just take our bag and make it 5 feet tall. And then we had to figure out how to ship it to us. So it was like they loved it, right? Like these factories are they're incredibly forward thinking. They're incredibly sophisticated, right? And so these operations are incredible. So like, we have these photos of like everybody standing around this bag, which was so much fun. And then we had to like ocean freight it over here and everything. It was a whole thing. But anyways, the point being that we have this 5-foot tall backpack. This girl, she's one of our content creators, was crawling into it to take a nap. And it's just very deeply understandable, no matter, like, you don't need language or anything for that, right? It's not about that. It's just a striking visual. The hook was solid. But does it produce results? Debatable, right? It's a little harder. Organic can be very murky in what it is. Whereas like, paid or even SEO is like very, very understandable in like where you're getting traffic, why you're getting traffic. Yeah.
I love that. So for whether it's talking to Brandon of 2015 or maybe talking to listeners that are just getting started with social, if you had to build your social following from the start, let's say you still have a good chunk of time, but let's give you half the time span. So rather than 10 years, you have 5 years. How would you go about approaching that process? I'm hearing that virality can have value, but I'm hearing a little bit of skepticism in it being the best place to really put all of your emphasis for the long term. Talk me through that. How would you build that following in half the time from the start?
Oh, that is a great question. I think the way that social media has now matured, right now that we're in 2025, I think personality-led accounts will do way better. So like, I think you have to have your brand account. And then I think that there is a very strong case to create like founder accounts or even kind of peripheral accounts if you can do it. The caveat to that is that like the founders have to be into that conceptually, right? And you have to be into content, right? It's not like, it's very easy to say like just post, but to learn the art of creating a good hook, creating a good story, telling a good story, being concise, not using big words and big jargon is very difficult. And so I think advice to myself for when I was younger is I wish I had kind of started posting sooner myself. That's its own kind of difficult journey for anybody, including myself. So, but there are incredible founders who are building incredible affinity to their brands and to themselves on social media. And I think there's large outsized returns. I don't know the numbers that they're doing revenue wise. It's a very like high quality revenue channel when done properly. So I think understanding the brand end of things, really important. Like you see like Duolingo and all of them, they're doing a great job. And then understanding how to build a personality brand, much like Marcus at Minted, right? Like they do an exceptional job at kind of running personality. That is a very efficient way to start a brand, in my opinion. Because otherwise, like brands traditionally take so much time and money to create. That's why like when direct consumer first emerged, really like kind of like 2014, 2015, everyone was like, oh my goodness, it doesn't take 30 years to build a brand like Patagonia. You can just take hundreds of millions of dollars, shove it into the ad machine, and like you'll have a brand, to which we've largely found like semi-works, right? It still takes a lot of time to get that affinity. You can't buy that affinity. But I think on social media, you can garner that affinity much faster than you think. I think like 6 to 8 weeks is kind of all it takes to really pop off if you do it correctly. And then like if you do that for a year, you'll have life-changing results, right? So like, you know, it'll be business changing, it'll be life changing. Maybe not for the better, maybe for the better. It all depends. It's kind of its own hamster wheel you have to hop on, because then you're committing to posting near daily. But yeah, that would be my advice. I think like if you're like low on cash, high on time, high on scrappiness, right? Then, you know, that right there will allow you to have outsized results.
And now, in your opinion, does it make sense to, I mean, there's a lot of social channels out there. Even if we think of just the big ones, I mean, today, I would argue it's really like Instagram. Facebook certainly has a massive base to it. I would argue maybe not as relevant for a lot of brands, but let's say like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn, if you're in maybe more so the B2B space. In your opinion, does it make sense for brands to start out saying, hey, we're going to hit every social channel, we're going to be posting on them X times a week? Or are most founders better off saying, hey, we're going to start out with this one channel, we're really going to nail this, and then we're going to grow from there?
You're better off picking one channel and owning it and growing from there. You can cross post, but I think the nuances of the channel make it very difficult. So you end up, instead of having kind of like one person you answer to, you're answering to 3 different people you're answering to, or 4 different people you're answering to. I think if you're B2B, it's a little easier to do the cross-posting thing. I think as a brand, it becomes more difficult. There kind of has to be a primary channel. And then you have a secondary channel that emerges because of, you're just like, well, we're already doing this. We might as well just continue to do this also on the other channels. I think like you end up hedging your risks by going into multiple channels, right? Like, especially if your business ends up becoming highly leveraged on organic, like some of these brands do. But for the most part, really catering to your audience on one channel really well will probably serve you better.
I love that. I love that. And I mean, to your point, it's as you said, it took a long time to build your Instagram following, but because of, in part, that Instagram following you had built, you were able to get over 1 million subscribers on YouTube and TikTok in like a third of the time. You know, if I remember correctly, I think you said maybe 2-3 years for YouTube, roughly the same for TikTok. But I think YouTube might have even been on the shorter end of that spectrum. I'm sure a lot of that starts out because you build this great following on Instagram, you learn who your base is, and then from there, you can take those learnings and apply them to those other channels.
Correct. Yeah, you get better at it. Like, yeah, YouTube took way shorter than TikTok, and then like TikTok was way shorter than Instagram. It definitely has to do with how they divvy up views and like their own algorithms and the sophistications there. But like, you know, at some point you like, once you figure it out, your account kind of pops. They call it popping. And so once it pops, then you have something very interesting on your hands.
So let's talk a little about what to actually post about. This is a question, and I struggle with this personally a lot. Internally, do you guys have like maybe a set general ratio in your mind of X% of posts are going to be like very product focused, they're going to be more promotional, sales driven, X are going to be like brand focused, and maybe, a small percentage is also going to be like viral focused as well. Like we just want to get a lot of eyeballs on this. How do you typically go about approaching that?
Great question. Our approach isn't that much different than what you'll see like a lot of like, TikTok gurus talking about. You have your content pillars, right? You have a really good hook. You have like, you got to tell a good story. We do have kind of like we're constantly testing things, right? Like, so you want to test something multiple times. You want some of it to be product focused. You want some of it to be viral focused. And ultimately you want to control the narrative to the best of your ability. I think organic social has a tendency of pulling in a direction, and it will always pull younger, which is interesting. So like eventually like the largest, most engaged audience are children. So you don't want to be there really. So you want to try your best not to go in that direction. But think about why like Mr. Beast and all that, they're so large. It's because it's so comprehensible, no matter the language or anything like that. I think there's a real sweet spot to be had where you're telling the stories that you want to tell and showing the sides of the brand that people want to see. And you're creating a universe that people want to participate in. Virality does not index for that. But like I said, I think there's a sweet spot. Like there's kind of like, you don't have to have the most viral videos to create incredible brand affinity. You want to find the right people. And these algorithms are great at finding the right people, so long as you're making good content. So it's really oftentimes only a matter of time and like how long you're willing to persist into finding the right person. Yeah, I think that answers the question.
Tell me if this sounds like you. You've started scaling the business through PPC channels like Facebook, but now it eats up 80% of your marketing budget, and ad costs continue to rise, pushing your margins down more and more every month. PPC is great for scaling your business in the early stages. The issue is PPC is like a faucet. As soon as you stop spending money, the sales instantly go away. So rather than paying per customer, we work with brands to build a steady stream of new customers through SEO. Those customers continue to flow for years after brands stop working with us. Interested in hearing more? Reach out to us directly at intergrowth.com/CGS to book a complimentary strategy session with our team.
Now, within that, what are maybe some of the sources of inspiration that Brevity looks to really identify, like, what should we actually be posting about? It's almost like that question of if you can post about everything, like, how do you decide what you actually post about on a daily basis?
Because like we've made like 3,000 videos about backpacks, right? And like the same few backpacks we have, which, like I said, I credit my brother Dylan. Like they're incredible at doing that. And like the persistence is incredible. Like it's just wild. There are some accounts we look to, right? You're just looking to accounts who are doing good viral stuff. We're looking at personalities, right? Other content creators who are creating inspirational content, right? Who have good storytelling. But otherwise, a lot of it is like you're kind of paving your own way. Right? There are kind of set formats that exist. So you're participating in those formats. You're trying those formats out. You're like, well, maybe this will work or maybe this will work. So you're like constantly A/B testing. But other than that, we're kind of like with e-commerce, I liken to, it's kind of the Wild West, right? It's like, this is this new form of retail. Like there's a lot of like new privacy laws and things like that. Everyone's like figuring it out as we go. We're like, whoa, like, what are we doing about all this data? And then like social media becomes even more the Wild West, right? Like they're still trying to figure out like, how this whole thing works. How do you regulate it? Do you not regulate it? Right? So for us, the ways and shapes and forms that these formats are taking, right? Like even like the behind the scenes stuff you're now starting to see with a lot of brands. Like this is all very new. It's like brand new. It's very current. It's not like it hasn't been around for years at a time, right? It's people have been coming up with it, right? They've been working at it for 5 years, maybe showing behind the scenes or other formats like that. But largely these formats they're brand new. And so like they only just became, in my mind, like acceptable to the mass market. And so that right there makes social media like difficult, but also really wonderful, right? Because if you can kind of come up with one of those formats, then you can do an incredible job. Look at like 12 Pell, who does haircuts, right? They kind of like really started showing everybody the transformation haircut. And then all the barbers started doing the transformation haircut. And I'm sure 12 Pell felt that. They were like, oh, wait a second. Somebody like now there's like the format has been democratized completely, right? So suddenly it's like maybe it's less unique to them. And then they got to go find the next thing, or they kind of have to kind of come up with their next thing. So yeah, that's a little bit like, it's kind of the double-edged sword of these social channels.
Oh, of course, of course. So one item that I would say I've had a very cold take on for a long time is I used to feel for most businesses, social media is not something you invest in until you've established your business quite a bit more. And I would typically tell businesses, hey, put your money into SEO, PPC at large. So certainly social, but a very different side of social media, the paid side of social. And my argument for it used to be, hey, social media drives such a small percentage of traffic relative to some of these other channels. Invest in the areas that, are going to bring people to your website. You look in Google Analytics, typically social media is not driving a ton of traffic to the average website. I've done a complete 180 on my perspective on that. And I think that social media is really hard to track success of, but so much of the success from social media, in my opinion, is far less tangible. It's more about like building that relationship, earning the trust, showing up, becoming front of mind. All that long-winded spiel aside, I'm curious if there are certain metrics that you've found are really effective in gauging whether social media is working or not, or if it is kind of just the type of thing where you say, we just know as a company that this is important. And we know that if we invest in putting out the right message to the right followers for the right period of time, that it's going to help us grow in the long term.
Oh, that's a really tough one. I would be in agreement in my own transformation on that as well. I think, like for us, we can see when a video does well, it'll produce revenue, right? You can kind of see it, or you can see traffic spike on the website. I think in this next age of content, right, and like organic content, in my opinion, I think it's going to be a lot more of the intangibles, right? Like that's where the brand building is going to take place. I think like before you could get away with making viral videos, but I think to really build long-term affinity, it's a lot of like doing the things that don't scale. And I think that's like actually just classic brand building stuff. It always comes back to the fundamentals. And like you think you can get away with not having the fundamentals because you've got some platform that's just popping off. But at the end of the day, I think like utilizing the platforms for like good classic brand building is a really strong activity. And even for us, like we found that as we've slowed down, while certainly metrics change, right? Like of course views are going to decrease. It doesn't affect the business maybe as much as you think it does, right? There's certain things like people have natural buying cycles, and like you want to do the brand affinity things. Because if you do those properly, it makes everything else more efficient. Like I would be in agreement though to like, I think it is good to look into like PPC and SEO and things like that, because those kinds of channels are less volatile and they compound, right? Like Google's always going to perform at a very specific CPM, right? Or same with SEO, like generally like, unless there's a major algorithm change, it's probably going to be pretty consistent. Organic short form video is like an ever changing landscape that's like happening in real time. Like, literally like TikTok shut down and then it opened back up a day later, right? I think it's just a more volatile channel. It's more like a lottery ticket system than a channel that compounds deep into the future. Like I said, it has outsized halo effects and it actually is a very high quality revenue channel, but it's kind of its own beast to tame and it's not always the easiest to do that.
Definitely. Well, and it's funny you mentioned the example of TikTok shutting down. So one little behind the scenes element from our podcast is we did this one recording, I believe it was back in December. It was all about TikTok. It was with listeners. It was with David Casey over at Vix Media, if you want to listen to it. But we recorded the episode. We had edited the episode. Typically, maybe it's 2 months after we record an episode, it'll go live. And I think it was 2-3 days before we were going to push the episode live, we found out that TikTok had officially been shut down in the US. So we said, like, what do we do with this episode? There's so much good stuff in here and maybe it's all for naught. And without getting into politics, strictly for like the benefit of the episode, I was very glad to see that TikTok's suspension was lifted in the US and then we were able to push it live. But to your point, there is a lot of volatility within these networks. TikTok has a big following, but have you found a good formula in terms of how to maybe assess when one of these new channels pops up? Like, is it a good use of Brevity's time to build out a following and to really invest in creating content for that channel?
Oh, I think a lot of these new channels, like, we always look at them, we always consider them, but each new channel takes a lot of effort. And so we're a small, scrappy team. We're not massive. So oftentimes we look at it and we're like, well, is this going to have a 10x return? And if it's not, right, we're not going to spend our time there. Because these businesses, like these brands, they scale to 100 million on one channel. They don't scale to 100 million on many channels, right? Like, they have many channels that increase the efficiency of the one channel. But even for us, as we look at it, like, in order to scale to 100 million, it's probably going to happen on Meta, right? Through Meta ads. And then, like, you're going to have peripheral Google ads and your organic and some sort of retail presence that's going to create that opportunity, with most likely retail being the arm that stabilizes the volatility of Meta ads and organic. But yeah, like, I think you're better off we're big fans of investing into the long to see returns on the short. So if you do the good brand building exercises, you do the fundamentals, you will really care deeply about your customers. Like, because it's so easy, I think, for everybody to look internal at their company and be like, well, how do we run our meeting structures and how do we do all this other stuff, right? And like, well, like, how are these talks going to perform, right? Like, how do we force virality? Like, if you just take a look at, like, who are your core customers, who are the people, like, who truly are going to champion your brand, usually the answer lies there. And usually you're better off kind of appeasing them to get the best results. So as far as new channels go, we look at them, we entertain them, but we oftentimes don't go for them just because of how much effort it takes to open up a new channel.
Brandon, this has been amazing. For listeners, let's say, first of all, that want to buy a Brevity backpack, but also that want to follow you guys on social and want to get inspiration about how they can build their own social following, talk us through how they can find you. Let's first of all, what is the company website?
Yeah, so you can go to brevity.co or even brevity.com, which was kind of cool when we got brevite.com. You can also follow us at Brevity on any channel. We'll be there for almost every channel, actually. So, but primarily TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. So give us a follow. If you're looking for a bag, our bags are wonderful. I've designed them. They are feature heavy. They are low impact on the environment. They're sustainable. They use recycled materials. We do a lot of civic engagement. So we've committed over $500,000 of backpacks to America's youth, New York City's homeless, AAPI initiatives. We really look at this as a foundation for good. Give us a follow. If you're looking for a really good backpack, they're a solid backpack. So thanks for having me, Pat.
Well, once again, listeners, this is Brandon Kim, the CEO and co-founder over at Brevity. Brandon, this has been awesome. Thank you for coming on today.
Thanks, Pat.
Thanks for tuning in to Customer Growth Sessions. If you found it helpful, subscribe and give us a review. It helps us to grow the show. Looking for more SEO guidance on how to grow your business? Contact us at intergrowth.com/estimator or email me directly. You can reach me at pat@intergrowth.com. That's all for today. We'll see you again soon.